Alright YouTube, I apologize for the slightly odd camera angle here. There's really nothing I can do about it. I can't, right now I'm not in my bedroom. I'm obviously on the breezeway. You can probably hear the cicadas. Sorry about that. Had to make this video. I wasn't really planning on it. I was going to get a shower, but I decided to make this instead because, you know, it's breaking news. It's Hillary's acceptance speech, of course, and she did accept, predictably, obviously, the nomination of her party to be the Democratic candidate. My analysis of Hillary's acceptance speech is as follows. Again, I say this as somebody who supports a third-party candidacy. I'm not voting for Hillary, and I'm not voting for Trump. Overall, I'd give the speech a 3.5 out of 10. It's best summed up as mechanical and mediocre. I say this as an independent voter who's supporting a third-party candidate. That is, it wasn't a disaster. People who are predicting it would be a disaster, most of them are, you know, they're Trump fans, they're partisan Republicans. They're going to look at the speech automatically because she's speaking largely to the Democrats within the partisan core, accepting the nomination, and then making a few asides to go after the independent voters while she's got that primetime slot. She's obviously, she's not really speaking to partisan Republicans. She doesn't really give a fuck what they think any more than when Trump made his acceptance speech. He didn't really care about what partisan Democrats were going to think about his speech. I would have given his at least a 6 out of 10 because he seemed more natural and in his element while speaking. It's the delivery, really, that hampers Clinton more than anything else. Again, I say this as somebody who has at least some knowledge on the subject, I assume, because I speak here on a daily basis. I never use a script. I wing it completely. And rarely, you know, I never edit the videos or anything like that. I do it all in one take. I don't use jump cuts. It's the delivery stupid, essentially. She sounded mechanical. She sounded a little bit like Marco Rubio when he spoke. That is, it's not what he's saying or what Hillary has said during her speech or any other speech she gives. It's a problem. The Democrats in the room obviously liked what she said, minus the Sanders fans. We'll get to that in a moment. That's one glaring problem here. The message was, you know, at least decent, at least moderate in terms of playing to who she was speaking to. You've got to understand your audience. She's not speaking to the whole country. She's largely speaking to Democrats and independents that might still vote for her that haven't made up their minds yet. But she seemed robotic. That is, the way that she speaks, the way that she gesticulates, it's obviously scripted. Now, Trump, even though his acceptance speech was delivered with the use of a teleprompter, seemed like he was still winging it. His verbal skills are simply better than Hillary Clinton's. His speaking capabilities, even when he goes off the rails momentarily, as he commonly does while speaking, that just makes him seem more organic, more unscripted. That's a strength. When people analyze that and say, oh, well, that's a weakness, he jumps around too much, he gets bombastic one moment and then quiets down the next, he doesn't simply speak with a monotone as though he's reading off a script very boringly. Hillary Clinton sounds like that person who was almost valedictorian and used to be on the debate team and was really cool in high school and now just smokes weed all day. That's essentially how you would class Hillary Clinton in the speaking category. Obama's speech was well made when he spoke to the DNC. I would have given his a 7 out of 10. His speech was very good. Yes, partisan, but delivered very well. Hillary does not have that advantage. It's one more way that she's not like Obama. She's older. She's more of a corporate centrist than he was. Even he leaned further to the left towards the sort of progressive movement, probably because he is black. He does have that unique perception of the world. Hillary, on the other hand, does not have that advantage. She is not a very good speaker. She's not particularly young. These are disadvantages within this election for her, for looking to the youth vote anyway, especially her age is a prevalent issue. Now, the Bernie Sanders bit is probably not going to harm her with the Democratic core, but two things happened during this speech that don't bode well for her reabsorbing at least a proportion of those further left, especially younger voters, back into her fold. As such, I think that will cause her any bump that she gets after this acceptance speech to falter a little bit. The first is the camera panned out over Bernie Sanders when she addressed him, and he didn't react to what she was saying. I think probably he was supposed to and just neglected to do so. Now, Sanders yesterday reverted back to being an independent, as opposed to staying with the Democratic Party. Of course, he's always been an independent before. He's never been a Democrat in registered terms before in his life. He's now an independent again. Bernie Sanders simply looked down at Hillary Clinton with his hands like this and stared. That's all he did. The only time he even cracked a smile is when people began chanting Bernie. Now, those same individuals that were chanting Bernie, Bernie when the camera was panning over him and he was being addressed, attempted to do the Bernie shout at several other points, and you could tell the DNC attempted to mute the microphones in that region of the room where they had segregated his remaining supporters. Of course, there was a walkout. Many of them left, so there were fewer of them anyway. They attempted to start a Bernie chant. The DNC turned off their microphones and quickly put on their white noise machines, which, yes, they have actually installed those there for that very purpose. They were afraid that Hillary was going to get shouted down during her acceptance speech. Now, we know this because at odd times while she's in the middle of speaking, people unexpectedly begin shouting Hillary, Hillary, right after the audio fizzles out just a little bit and sounds a little bit odd coming from the audience. That's because they attempted the Bernie chant, the microphones were switched over, the machines were switched on, and Hillary's fans, which are the majority in the room, began shouting Hillary, Hillary. These two things will not go unnoticed. They will not bode well for her reabsorbing a large proportion of her younger base. You can expect an extra point to go to Jill Stein and probably a bit less to Gary Johnson, and maybe even half a point to Trump as a result of that. These individuals have a low tolerance for Hillary Clinton, and really she needed to sew up. She needed to give far more glowing praise, I think, to Sanders than she did. She glossed it over very briefly. I don't see good things for her on that horizon. One of the other problems is that many independents watching this will have the following problem. Hillary Clinton is perceived by the majority of the U.S. population as untrustworthy. Now, her unfavorability overall is about the same as Trump's, but on trustworthiness, she's got about a 15-point deficit there. It's a significant gap. From an independent perspective, watching her, it always stuck in the back of my mind while she was speaking, well, all of these promises she's making, all of the things she's saying here, how do I even know she's going to fulfill them? For instance, when she talked about disastrous trade deals, obviously alluding to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. She will sign the TPP if elected. We already know that she is in favor of it. It was in her book. She claims now that she wants to at least look at it and reform it before passing it. I don't think so. Citizens United. I think we all are in large agreement, including many people who plan to vote for her anyway, that she's not actually going to consider a constitutional amendment to overthrow Citizens United. It's just not going to happen because that's how her campaign is being funded. Overall, though, again, I would rate the speech as mediocre and mechanical. The former largely because of the latter. Glossing over Sanders isn't really a verbal error. It's really not a problem with the message. It really has to do with party unity. It has to do with the cohesiveness of the Democratic core. Unfortunately, I think she failed at that very important goal. But that's not a problem with the speech itself. I think largely it was with the delivery. Giving glowing praise to the revolution and talking about togetherness and decrying her opponent as dangerous, those are all fine. That's what you would expect during an acceptance speech. But if you can't deliver them effectively, that becomes a problem. She sounded like a robot. She sounded scripted. Now, the fact that her opponent during his acceptance speech was also scripted matters far less than people's perception of it as a speech that they think in the back of their minds it sounds natural, or it sounds like maybe he winged it a little bit and ignored the teleprompter at times to make it seem more natural and organic. That is a net positive for him, his speaking abilities on that token. You will remember, of course, throughout the vast majority of the primaries until the end when he had sealed it up already and knew he would be the nominee, he didn't use a teleprompter. He does have experience making that sort of speech. There is a reason that the big thing that I see, the big problem for Hillary that I see as far as sounding mechanical, is that it fits in with people's predisposition to think that everything she does is scripted and planned in advance, specifically because she won't talk to the media, hasn't held a press conference in nearly a year, and seems reclusive. So I think, I don't think that her bump will be as great as Trump's, and that's assuming, by the way, that's assuming that the lasting damage of the DNC leaks, they released voicemails as well in the last 24 hours, in addition to the emails. That's assuming that the damage from that and or the rise in Trump support from his own acceptance speech doesn't simply cancel out any rise she would have gotten. I don't think she's going to suddenly decline 10 points because people think she sounds mechanical. It's not going to affect her with people that were already planning to vote for her. Nobody's going to change their minds unless something absolutely catastrophic happens in the Clinton camp. The same is true of Trump and his support. Each one of these individuals has about a third of the voting population sewn up. They won't change their minds. Now, from here on out, it's all about the independent voters and softer support within the party that's not fully partisan. That is, independents who lean towards being more conservative or paleoconservative or libertarian on Trump's end, independents which lean further left or they're more social welfare centrists or something on Hillary's side. Those are the groups they need to focus on. The problem is this is probably a predictor of how they will perform at the debates. When Obama was matching up against McCain or Romney when he was running for election, his capabilities in debating were far greater than his opponents. In the first debate with Romney, he kind of stumbled, he looked tired, people remarked upon that fact. He was forgiven for this largely because in the next two debates he made up for lost time, and he simply blew past Romney. Also, Romney sabotaged his own campaign with the leaked recordings about the 47% and his failure to really differentiate his platform from Obama. He also disappeared for a month at the end of the campaign and was barely heard from, giving Obama the entire news cycle. It was a failed campaign. It was really Mitt Romney's fault more than anything else that he didn't unseat Obama, if he ever had a chance to do that anyway. However, in this election, looking at the two dueling acceptance speeches, it appears that Trump is simply a much better deliverer of the message he has. Now, delivery matters just as much as what you're actually saying. You can have the greatest ideas in the world, and if you attempt to pitch those ideas to another person, and you're stammering, and you're speaking in a monotone, and you seem like you're just out of it, like everything's just scripted, it's not going to work as well as somebody who is delivering a halfway coherent idea and speaks really well in glowing platitudes about what they're trying to pitch to you. This is fairly obvious. You can look at this as the difference between a well-meaning but ineffectual individual and an evildoer snake oil salesman. Now, obviously, Trump supporters wouldn't class him as a snake oil salesman, but he is quite clearly better at delivering pitches for the product he's selling, which is why you should vote for Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, for all of the positives that her fans see, is not as capable of delivering that pitch. In fact, she has been largely absent from pitching it outside of the realm of the occasional tweet and the occasional captive media interview for more than 200 days now. She really hasn't done that much. She's attended rallies, where again she delivers scripted speeches, and the comparison remains the same. At no time have I ever perceived Hillary in this campaign, or in the 2008 campaign for that matter, at no time did it ever escape notice that she was scripted. She never wings it. She makes sure that everything is perfectly scripted before she delivers it. Trump, in the meantime, everyone thought he would destroy his own campaign because he wasn't scripted. He managed to fumble through it, partially due to his own speaking skills, partially due to the rise of populism on the right anyway, and partially as well due to the stupidity of his opponents. One of the main bits of stupidity of one of his viable opponents was Rubio being robotic. We all saw what happened. Rubio had outraised him by an order of magnitude. He clearly was a good speaker when he really got into it. But as soon as it was pointed out how robotic it was, everything collapsed. I think that's going to be a big problem for Hillary. Probably a bigger problem than the perception of her as untrustworthy is the problem of her being perceived of as not even having an original idea to begin with. I think combine those two things together, and it's just a magic elixir to destroy a campaign. So yeah, I think that her speech wasn't a disaster, but the delivery seemed so jerky and so jarring that I'm not sure that in the long term it's really going to help her campaign. This will give her a bump with the partisans. It'll absorb some of the Sanders support back into her camp. But I think she may have just hemorrhaged more of it than she reabsorbed, number one. And number two, I think a lot of that new support will be a lot softer than what Trump has managed to amalgamate. I anticipate him achieving a new paradigm above where he was. I don't necessarily see Hillary Clinton doing the same. That being said, of course, others will, of course, disagree with me because many of them are partisans. You ask somebody who's completely on board with Trump and wearing the MAGA hat, they'll say, oh, it was a disaster. 0 out of 10. It was the worst thing I ever heard. It was terrible. You ask somebody who's a shill for Hill and has the I'm with her t-shirt, they probably thought it was the best thing that they ever heard. Oh, we were smashing the glass ceiling. It's so great. So you can't really rely upon the media for a fair account. You can't really rely upon the people that are already pledged to a candidate. You have to pay attention to people who aren't pledged to either candidate, aren't in the mainstream media, and don't get paid to simply shill for a candidate. That's my analysis anyway of her acceptance speech. Wasn't terrible, but I don't think it addressed two of the major fundamental issues that people have with Hillary Clinton. Again, reabsorbing the Sanders support and the fact that she seems untrustworthy, scripted, a little bit out of touch and batty. That's about all. Peace out.